want to ask you guys a question. How often are you guys pausing and reflecting? And I mean on a daily, consistent basis. A lot of times we can float throughout the day and the week and just do so in a reactive, mindless kind of way. We may start off with good intentions and then the day gets away from us, and that happens. And at the same time, how often are you guys creating those systems in place so that when challenges arise, you guys are not reacting out of panic or anger, but rather from a place of responsiveness? So here's what I mean. We need to be daily having a routine of pausing and reflecting in the mornings. That could be 5 to 10 minutes of logistically even planning out your day. It could be relationally thinking of how you'll intentionally show up when you see your kids in the morning or your partner, or even in the evenings when you guys come home. How will you, in spite of your fatigue, in spite of your overwhelm, or however you may feel at the end of the day, come home and show up in your own family with your kids? Will you be delighted to see them? Walking through those in your mind helps so that you can be ready to follow through with those actions and with those intentions. So evenings, I like to close the loop in the evenings. Ask yourself these questions. What went well today? What worked? What didn't? What would I do differently next time? And that could be, again, logistical, or it could be relational. How would I respond differently to my child next time this happens? So those are scheduled, and it really helps also to have just a check-in throughout the day somewhere. What is your body doing? What are the physical tensions you're holding on to? How can you notice that, be mindful of it, and then how do you pause and process it and let it dissipate? All of these help to regulate your nervous system, which, guess what happens? Helps you to co-regulate with your kids. That co-regulation piece starts with you. And these are just very subtle, you would think indirect practices that actually impact your relationship with your kids and how you show up as a parent very powerfully. So out of the moment, let's look at some challenges that you guys have brought to me this week. One of you guys shared that you guys lost your temper with your child after having a very stressful evening, and afterwards you felt a lot of regret and shame and guilt. And what I suggested to this parent is to also sit in and pause and reflect in that. Don't just let that moment disappear and not close the loop on it. Every challenge presents an opportunity for you guys to really learn from and capitalize and to pivot to do things differently. The key is pause and reflect. So this parent needed to pause and reflect on what was going on in her body. And at that moment, she wanted to sit and just journal and just process things. And what I suggested was, because that's kind of a top-down approach, you're thinking about it, you're using your mind to process it. Sometimes when we are in such a state of high stress and dysregulation, just like our kids, the first thing is not to logic our way out of it or to take deep breaths, but rather to let those physiological responses dissipate. One of the best ways to do that is through movement, and even large body movement. But for starters, I suggested just to go take a walk and process this as you're walking. First, sit in those feelings of guilt and shame and let that be for a moment. And afterwards, as you process that, what tends to happen is that those physiological responses, they tend to dissipate. So the tension can a lot of times be felt released, and coming back online as far as cognition and being able to process what went well in that situation, what happened, how did we get from 0 to 10, or what would I do differently next time? And the cool thing about this mom is that she actually did go back and made a repair with her daughter and reflected on what would be done differently next time. And even her daughter, she asked her daughter, what should I have done differently? And her daughter had some great insights and gave her some feedback on that. So the relationship was repaired, restored, and then there was some collaboration on what could be done next time as a team. So there's a team and family dynamic there that is being strengthened in the midst of a challenging moment. So pause and reflect on the discomfort. And I want to give you guys an example here. Last week I was in a classroom and this child went from, it seemed like 0 to 10 and just screaming at the top of his lungs for what seemed like a long time, but in actuality it was about 5 or 6 minutes maybe. And you can sense the tension rising in the classroom. I sense the teachers panicking. I could tell they were trying to help and offer him a different toy instead of the one that he wanted and tried to get from another student. And of course, I just kept escalating. And eventually, I just sat next to him, didn't say anything, but just sat about 2 feet away from him. And I was presenting myself as calm too, even though internally I felt a little bit of a anxiety just from the noise and the panic of wondering myself, are these other kids going to be triggered and start melting down as well? And what we ended up doing was simply just sitting there and letting him see our presence. And the only thing he did that we needed to help with was throwing blocks. And so we removed the blocks and then replaced it with a teddy bear. And he threw that too. However, we allowed him to do that because that was safe to throw. There was no one nearby. And even if it had hit someone, which we would have tried to keep from happening, they wouldn't have gotten hurt. So this experience gave us some data. It told us that as angry as he was not intentionally trying to hurt anyone. Even when he was throwing blocks, it was directed towards an empty area. So the other thing that it showed us was that he was actually very capable of regulating with our presence. So that was more co-regulating. However, after just 3 or 4 minutes into it, he started you can see the physiological response dissipating. You can see his eyes starting to focus again. You can hear the screaming, the volume coming down. His body was slowing down. You can see his chest rising and his breath was kind of slowing down a bit. So all of that happened just from us sitting there with him instead of trying to talk him out of it or dissipate that emotion any quicker than it needed to. And so afterwards, we closed the loop. So with the director who actually happened to walk in, and she also was unsure what to do. And again, we all just defaulted to, we're not going to do anything. We're going to not do the thing we were had the urge to do, which was to jump in and try to fix. And afterwards, when we paused and reflected between the two of us, collaborated, and we just went down the list, we debriefed, whoa, what worked in that moment? What really worked was that he saw that we were present, that we were not assuming, not trying to correct or discipline or punish, I should say, but rather just being present with him and showing that he is accepted, even with those big emotions. All emotions are welcome, and he had our support in that moment. So that helped him to dissipate so much quicker. And again, this is why we need to pause and reflect so that we can debrief and see what is working, what's not, so that we keep moving the needle. Next time this happens, what will we do differently? Which in that moment, it went really well. We would probably do the exact same scenario and then hope that over time, those meltdowns and outbursts will decrease in intensity, duration, and frequency, which I very strongly believe will happen because many of you guys have shared with me that your experiences with outbursts and meltdowns are starting to decrease in the intensity, duration, and frequency, just like I said. So all of this is taking small actions, taking the time to pause and reflect, having a scheduled time daily so it's consistent, it's a habit, but then also taking the time to capitalize and leverage those challenges will help you do so more quickly. That's the real lived experience there that you guys get to dissect and learn from. Hope that helps. Let me know what you think.